There are 8 questions that almost every one of us has heard, asked, or wanted to run away from when someone asked us back. They sound harmless, light as a breeze in casual conversation. But if you dared to turn the mirror around, to ask that same question back at the person who asked, silence usually falls fast. An awkward smile, a glance that drifts away, or even, "Oh, sorry, I've got a call to take." Because deep down, they know those questions touch the most sensitive part of every human being, the insecurity we're all trying to hide. Questions like these, about work, money, relationships, happiness, aren't bad at all. The problem is, they shine a light on the parts of ourselves we're not ready to face yet. When you feel uncomfortable with a question, it's not always because the other person is being rude. It might be because the question reflects the very corner of yourself you've been avoiding. From my experience, after years of working with thousands of people in the US, I've realized this. No one is truly afraid of the question itself. They're afraid of the mirror that question creates. How's work? Are you happy? What do you do? These aren't attacks. They're opportunities to look back at yourself, honestly and without filters. And if right now, as you listen, you feel a little sting, a little ache inside, don't click away. That feeling is the sign that you're actually listening. You're starting to look just a little deeper into yourself. At the end of this video, I'll read one of my favorite comments from the previous episode. Maybe it'll be yours. But before we get there, let's go through 8 simple questions. Small as they may seem, they hold the power to reflect an entire life. 1. Are you happy? Try stopping for a moment and ask yourself this. Are you happy? It sounds simple, but I've seen so many eyes flicker with uncertainty at those 3 little words. Many people smile and say, "Of course." But the smile often stops at their lips. It never reaches their eyes. In my therapy sessions, I call that emotional bypassing, using positive phrases to cover up the emptiness inside. Things like, "I'm fine, just a bit tired," or "I've been so busy I haven't had time to think about it." But being busy isn't always a sign of living well. Sometimes it's just a mask, a way to avoid sitting still and feeling what's really going on inside. I remember one client, a successful man in his 40s, once told me, "I have everything, a house, a car, a stable job. But when my daughter asked me, 'Dad, are you happy?' I didn't know what to say." He smiled as he said it, but his voice trembled. That was the moment he realized. All those years, he had been maintaining a life, not truly living one. When I ask you, "Are you happy?" I'm not looking for a quick answer. I want you to pause, take a deep breath, and really feel it. When you wake up in the morning, does your heart feel light? At night, when you turn off the lights, do you feel a little bit of peace inside? Or are you just repeating a string of "I'm fine" days, not sure where you're headed? You see, happiness isn't a fixed state. It's the ability to be honest with yourself. If you can say, "No, I'm not truly happy yet, but I'm learning to be happier each day," that's already a huge step forward. The funny thing is, many people are afraid to admit they're unhappy, thinking it makes them weak. But in my experience, the bravest thing you can do is to face your own emptiness head on. Only when you acknowledge it can you begin to change. So if someone asks you today, "Are you happy?" don't rush to answer. Just smile, not to hide, but to start an honest conversation with yourself. 2. How's work these days? How's work these days? It sounds like just a polite question, doesn't it? But if you pay attention, sometimes your heart skips a beat when you hear it, doesn't it? I've heard that question hundreds of times. In therapy sessions, at workshops, even while standing in line at a coffee shop. It seems harmless, but in truth, it's a subtle way of measuring self-worth. The human brain is wired to compare. We're born with the instinct to find our place on the social leaderboard. When things are going well, we talk about work with pride. But when we're struggling, unemployed, or simply burned out, that same question suddenly feels like a wound being touched. I remember a young woman once told me in a session, "I hate when people ask me about work. Not because I don't have a job, but because I don't know if I'm even on the right path." And I understood her completely. Because sometimes the pain doesn't come from failure. It comes from not knowing if you still believe in what you're doing. When someone asks, "How's work?" they're unconsciously poking at our fear of falling behind, something we psychologists call social comparison bias, that creeping feeling that everyone else seems to be moving forward, except you. You open social media and see friends getting promoted, buying houses, upgrading cars, and suddenly that simple question echoes in your mind like a reminder that you're not enough. But here's the truth. No one stays on track forever. Human lives aren't straight upward lines. We're curves. Sometimes we move forward, sometimes sideways, sometimes even backward. And that's perfectly normal. I often tell my clients, you don't need the perfect job. You just need a direction that makes you feel alive. There are seasons in life when finding your passion again is a job. And honestly, it's one of the most important ones you'll ever have. So next time someone asks, "How's work?" don't rush to feel judged. See it as a chance to ask yourself, am I living the way I want, or just the way society says I should? If your answer brings you peace, then even if you're not yet successful, you're still on the right path. And if it doesn't, that's okay too. Because realizing you're lost is always the first step toward finding your way again. 3. When are you getting married? Do you have someone yet? When are you getting married? 4 simple words, yet enough to make countless people force a smile, look away, or quickly change the subject. In America, or anywhere really, that question seems to cross all borders and cultures. It's a common social ritual, but deep down, it carries the weight of social conformity. The psychological need to fit in, to not be seen as different. No matter how strong we are, we all want to belong somewhere. And when you're the only one in your circle or family who's still single, that question can feel like a tiny needle pricking at your self-esteem. You might not feel the pain immediately, but it lingers. I once had a client in her 30s tell me during a session, "I'm not afraid of being alone. I'm afraid people will think I'm lonely." That line hit me deeply, because many people don't look for love because they need love. They do it because they're afraid of being different. They dread family gatherings filled with questions, pitying glances, or the half-joking remarks. "You're so beautiful. How come nobody's married you yet?" But you know, real maturity isn't measured by whether you have someone. It's measured by how well you understand yourself. In behavioral therapy, we emphasize this truth. Love doesn't heal loneliness. Only self-awareness does. I once asked a male client, "If you met the perfect person tomorrow, are you sure you'd be happy?" He was silent for a long time, then said, "I'm not sure, because sometimes I don't even know what I want." And that's the point. You don't need someone else to complete you. You need space to understand who you are, what you need, and what truly brings you peace. So the next time someone asks, "When are you getting married?" or "Do you have someone yet?" just smile. Not the awkward kind, but the smile of someone who knows you're not following society's schedule. You're living by your own rhythm. Because in the end, true love isn't about finding someone to live with. It's about finding peace within your own life, whether you're with someone or not. 4. How much do you make? How much do you make? A question that sounds direct, maybe even practical. But for many people, it's harder to answer than questions about love or emotions. Because deep down, it's not just asking about income. It's touching your sense of worth in the eyes of society. In today's world, money isn't just a tool for living. It's become the language of value. We define success by numbers, and sometimes even our self-respect gets tagged to our income. So when someone asks, "How much do you make?" your ears hear one thing, but your heart hears another. Are you good enough? Are you worthy of respect? I once had a client, a talented software engineer, tell me he dreaded his high school reunions. No one says it out loud, he said, but everyone's silently comparing. Who's making more? Who's working at a bigger company? He laughed, then added, I realized they don't really want to know how I'm doing. They just want to know if I'm doing better than them. From a psychological perspective, this is what we call status anxiety, the fear of losing your place on the social ladder. It's one of the most common anxieties in modern society, where human value is often measured by visible symbols: salary, address, the car you drive, the brand of watch on your wrist. But here's the interesting thing. People who ask about money the most are often the ones comparing themselves the hardest. They're not asking because they care. They're asking for reassurance that they're still ahead. Now, picture this. You're sitting across from an old friend, and they ask, so, how much are you making these days? What do you feel? A bit of discomfort, a desire to change the subject, maybe even the temptation to lie just to get it over with? That feeling doesn't come from the question itself. It comes from a deeper fear that your worth is being measured and weighed. I often tell my clients, don't confuse your worth with your wage. Income is just a number. Your worth is what you bring to yourself, to others, to the world. You might earn less than someone else, but if you live authentically, laugh often, sleep peacefully, and love deeply, you're already rich in a way money could never measure. So the next time someone asks, how much do you make? Just smile. Not the awkward kind, but the smile of someone who knows their worth doesn't live on a paycheck. And sometimes silence is the most elegant answer to a small question that carries a very big bias. 5. What do you do in life? What do you do in life? Sounds harmless, doesn't it? A light, polite question, often tossed around at parties, conferences, or first meetings. But in truth, it's one of the questions that cuts right into a person's identity. I've heard hundreds of people introduce themselves with lines like, I'm a doctor, I work in tech, I'm a teacher, and I get it. It's the easiest way to tell the world, this is who I am. But here's the problem. What happens if one day you're no longer doing that job? Will you still know who you are? In behavioral psychology, we call this identity dependency, the tendency to tie our sense of self-worth to our professional role. That's why when people lose a job, retire, or change direction, the pain often isn't just about losing income. It's about feeling like they've lost a piece of themselves. I remember one client, a pilot for over 20 years, who was forced to retire for health reasons. He told me, I don't know who I am anymore. I'm no longer captain. I don't have my uniform. No one greets me in the morning. That wasn't just the loss of a job. It was the collapse of an identity. And truthfully, we all fall into that trap. Society teaches us to define ourselves by our titles, job roles, or the name on our badge. But the truth is, your work is just one part of who you are. It's not the whole story. I often remind my clients, and myself, to replace the question, what do I do, with, what am I building? That small shift changes everything. Because when you say, I'm building something, you see yourself as someone on a journey, not a fixed label. Think about it. You can lose a job, but you never lose your ability to create value. You can change careers, but still continue to build, learn, and give. So when someone asks, what do you do in life? Answer calmly, I'm building a life I'm proud of, one day at a time. Because in the end, your job is just a tool. The meaning of your life. That's what you're quietly creating every single day, in every small thing you do. 6. Why haven't you bought a house yet? Why don't you have a car? Why haven't you bought a house? No car yet? On the surface, it sounds friendly, even caring. But underneath, it often lands like a soft tap on the ego, a reminder of where you should be by now. In America, or really anywhere that social media and silent comparison exist, this question has become a form of material achievement pressure, the unspoken rule that defines success by what you own. Modern society teaches us that owning a house means stability, Owning a car means independence. Owning investments means intelligence. And slowly, we start equating our self-worth with our visible assets. The more we have, the more worthy we feel. The less we have, the more we fear being judged. I once had a client, an art teacher, who told me she always felt small during reunions when her friends talked about homes, cars, and investments. I love what I do, she said, but sometimes I feel like I'm falling behind. And I asked her, falling behind? Compared to whom? She went quiet. Because the truth was, there wasn't anyone specific, only an image in her head of who she thought she had to be to finally feel enough. According to long-term studies from Harvard University, happiness only increases with income up to a certain point, just enough to feel safe and secure about food and shelter. Beyond that, satisfaction barely moves. In other words, once your basic needs are met, the rest of happiness comes from contentment and self-acceptance. I once asked a wealthy friend, someone who had everything he'd ever dreamed of, "Do you feel happier now than before you had all this?" He smiled and said quietly, "Not really. I just have more things to worry about now. So, if someone asks you, 'Why haven't you bought a house?' Or, 'Why don't you have a car?' Don't feel embarrassed. They might not mean to judge you. They're simply living by a different measuring stick, one where human worth is translated into assets. But you don't have to play by that scale. You're not missing success. You're missing self-acceptance. Because the most beautiful home isn't a place on a map. It's the peace you feel inside when you come back to yourself. And if you're living a simple life, not luxurious, but calm, and you sleep soundly at night, then congratulations. You already have something that many wealthy people still can't buy. 7. Why haven't you changed? Why haven't you changed? It sounds like encouragement, but if you listen closely, there's often a quiet layer of judgment behind it. It's as if the speaker is saying, "You're still not good enough." I've heard that phrase in so many forms, from parents to children, friends to friends, and even from that inner voice we all carry. In behavioral psychology, we call it improvement pressure, the constant demand to become a better version of ourselves. In modern society, always improving has almost become a religion. But few people realize how easily it can turn into exhaustion, a burnout disguised as growth. I once worked with a brilliant, ambitious woman who always had a list of things she needed to improve. Learn new skills, go to the gym, eat clean, read daily. But during one session, she broke down and said through tears, "I'm tired of always having to try to be better. I've never been allowed to just be myself." That hit me deeply, because sometimes growth isn't about how fast you change. It's about understanding and accepting where you are in the process. Some wounds need time to heal. Some old patterns need more than motivational quotes to fade away. Imagine this. You're climbing a mountain. Others may be higher, moving faster, but you don't know where they started. And only you know how much emotional weight you're carrying in your backpack. So moving slower doesn't mean you're failing. It just means you're moving at a pace that fits you. Over the years, I've realized something. People who change sustainably aren't the ones who force themselves to be different. They're the ones who understand why they want to change. When your motivation comes from love, not fear, that's when transformation truly lasts. So if someone says, "Why haven't you changed?" just smile. They don't realize you are changing, quietly, from the inside out. Because sometimes the greatest change isn't about becoming someone new. It's about finally learning not to hate who you already are. 8. Are you living the life you want? Are you living the life you want? Just 7 words, but enough to make a room fall silent. I often start my therapy sessions with that question, and almost everyone pauses for a long time before answering. Eventually, most say slowly, "Not really." And I understand, because that question isn't about work, money, or love. It touches the deepest layer of existence. It's where we begin to ask ourselves, am I truly living, or just living the life others expect of me? In psychology, we call this existential anxiety, the fear about the meaning of one's life. It shows up when you start realizing you might be moving very fast, but you're not sure where the road leads. I once spoke with a man in his 50s, a successful businessman who had everything most people dream of. When I asked him that question, he smiled and said, "From the outside, it probably looks like I'm living the perfect life. But really, I'm just living a life that other people approve of." That answer has stayed with me ever since, because it revealed something powerful. Most people aren't living wrong. They're just living disconnected from themselves, missing the courage to say, "This is what I truly want." In cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, we often tell clients, meaning isn't something you find, it's something you create. In other words, you don't need to have all the answers right now. You just need to start living honestly, even with one small part of yourself. Try imagining this. If tomorrow you lived just 5% more truthfully to who you are, what would change? Maybe you'd say no to something you don't really want. Maybe you'd spend 30 minutes doing something that makes you feel alive. Or maybe you'd simply stop pretending that everything is fine. And sometimes, that honesty alone is enough to begin changing your life. So if today, the question, "Are you living the life you want?" makes you feel a little sting, don't rush to call it pain. See it as a wake-up call. Because the moment you have the courage to say, "Not yet," that's when you truly begin to live. Your life doesn't have to be perfect to be meaningful. It just needs to be real to your feelings, your values, and the person you're becoming.